Welcome to the Dork Forest. Jackie and her pals will never bore us. Shameless confessions
about our obsession
will make us laugh and smile. So let's explore the Dork Forest and dork out for a while.
Hello and welcome to the Dork Forest. I'm Jackie Cation. I am your host of the Dork Forest. You probably know the websites, JackieCation.com, DorkForest.com, TheDorkForest.com. We're all over iTunes and whoever has downloaded it and repurposed it for whatever your needs. That's right. So feel free to review the show on iTunes. Feel free to email me, Jackie@JackieCation.com, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns. Anyway, let's do the credits. Mike Rickberg composed and sang that song you just heard. He sang it with his wife, Sarah. He'll sing again his words to the Mexican hat dance at the end of the program. Patrick Brady is going to fix this audio, and Vilmos does my website. Okay. There are many ways to support the show. Let's talk about them. The easiest way is just to tell other people about the show and follow me on Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat @JackieCation and tell people word of mouth. Another way to support the show financially, doesn't cost you anything, is the Amazon banner. On JackieCation.com, there's an Amazon banner under Support the Show. And on DorkForest.com, there's just an Amazon link that takes you to Amazon. And both take you to Amazon. You order like normal, and the show gets a little bit of a kickback. Doesn't cost you extra. It's just a way, if you order from Amazon, to help the show. More direct way of helping the show, you can give money to the show via PayPal. There's a PayPal button under the Support the Show page on JackieCation.com, and there's a PayPal button on DorkForest.com. You can donate directly. If you want to give monthly, I haven't made that easy. I don't have a monthly setup. I know that it's easy. I just don't have any time to do it. So you have to remember every month that you like the show and then give me money. So I'll use it wisely on audio cables and chocolate, whatever. Another way to support the show, if you don't like PayPal, is people have been Venmoing me money. I'll take it. That seems lovely. Jackie@JackieCation.com. It's just under Jackie Cation. So whatever. If you have listened to all 600 and whatever episodes of the Dork Forest and would like more Dork Forest, there are premium episodes, probably a dozen of them. And they are, in the last couple of years, if I do a live episode, it usually costs me some money. So I have been putting them up on Bandcamp, and they cost money. They cost $2 a pop. But if you go to thedorkforest.bandcamp.com, you can see those different shows. They're usually live episodes around the world. And there is also four stories on a sort of a handmade storytelling album that I made over there too. And those are just $1 each. So if you want to go to Bandcamp, you can do that as well. You can order merch on JackieCation.com. There are shirts and CDs and a DVD of my stand-up. There's the stand-up CDs, Circus People, It's Never Gonna Be Bread, This'll Make an Excellent Horcrux, and my brand new album, I Am Not the Hero of This Story. And they're all available as CDs on JackieCation.com. They're all available digitally on Amazon and iTunes, and you can just listen to them on Pandora and Spotify and whatever. So, but if you like hard copies, let me know if you want them signed or not. There's also a DVD of the Horcrux album, which is video. That's what a DVD is. And you can download that at comedyfilmnerds.com if you just like a download. Okay, there are shirts. There's my stand-up shirt, Spooky Reading Girl. There's also 2 Dork Forest t-shirts. So there's the Ranger of the Dork Forest t-shirt, and there is a Dork Forest logo shirt. And all the shirts are made in the United States, union made, so they run a little big because they're made by Americans. Other than that, my stand-up is available on the website, on JackieCation.com. You can watch my Conan sets. You can watch a bunch of different stand-up sets. You can, and then you can see what my schedule's like. Enough of this. Let's get into the show. It's a really good one. Hey, it's Jackie Cation. I'm in my living room with Wyatt Gray, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi there.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm feeling good. Thanks so much for having me.
Sure, no problem. And it's at Wyatt S. Gray. S
at
like
Wyatt
Scott
S. Gray.
Or
Spencer. This is my middle name. Yep.
Wyatt Spencer Gray. That's kind of a great name. Where's the great American novel? Just stand up so far, right?
Just stand up so far.
And November 11th, which is not just 2 weeks from now, if you're in LA, and you can follow Wyatt S. Gray on Twitter and get all the LA sets.
Yep.
But you're doing a 7 p.m. at Nerd Melt. Killer Unicorns is the name of the show, but it's a straight stand-up show.
Straight stand-up show. I host and co-produce that show, and we just moved to Meltdown at the Nerd Melt showroom, so we're really excited. It's going to be our second month doing it there. Second outing there. First one went great.
On a Saturday. Yeah, and this one has Aaron Foley and Scout Durwood.
Yep.
So those two are great.
Absolutely.
Great
I'm sure you've worked with them in the past.
I have.
And thanks so much for doing the plugs up top so that, we even if people fall off the podcast, they still...
How can they fall off when it's going to be a spooky Halloween episode?
Oh my God. This is... Oh man, I am in my wheelhouse completely. It's my favorite month. I'm talking about one of my favorite authors.
Excellent.
I have...
you have notes?
Oh my gosh, do I have notes?
That is awesome because I only know... I'd never even heard of him before I got married because my dorkdom does not lend itself to the spooky.
You're not a spooky horror movies?
No,
not for you.
Not
well,
it.
Here's the cool thing though, and because you actually brought into my first quadrant of my notes, which is I thought a good place to start is you're a comedian, so
right.
I myself I'm not sure you're someone who has a vast array of knowledge about many things, but kind of little pieces of it because you need to kind of have that word web.
It's a shallow field.
So I wanted to
a lot of holes.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of say when you hear H.P. Lovecraft, when you hear Lovecraftian, what comes to mind, and then I think we can kind of go from there,
right.
and sort of piece together those disparate bits of knowledge.
It's funny about the H.P. Lovecraft because I have been trying to have Aaron Vanek. I don't know if you know Aaron.
I don't know Aaron Vanek.
He runs a H.P. Lovecraft film festival somewhere. I've been trying to have him, but he doesn't like to drive.
Oh,
so but this is because we were just talking. I said, you can be on the show, and you're like, well, I love H.P. Lovecraft.
Big
and I was
fan.
like, here's what I know about H.P. Lovecraft. 13 years ago, I met Andy Ashcraft, and his friends are giant nerds of all the things, and they do a lot of LARPing, and they do a lot of tabletop games, and they write their own adventures with champions and D&D and whatever, and ad not nauseum. Let's not say that.
Absolutely.
And so H.P. Lovecraft came up, and I said, "Who's that? And who is Cthulhu?" And then I was given.
Oh, definitely, we'll get into that.
Right. This information is that H.P. Lovecraft is an author who had some unfortunate racial attitudes.
Oh, do you see my third quarter?
Very large.
We're going to need to touch on that too. That is my reading Lovecraft in a modern context, a.k.a. he was racist.
Right.
Yeah, we'll need to touch on that
We'll
at some
touch on
point.
that.
Yeah.
So all I know is, here's what I know. H.P. Lovecraft wrote sort of monstery books that are... if talking to different people, the writing is hit and miss, but they were pulpy, and he was churning them out, and he created an amazing world. People have resonated with all of his monsters, and he was a racist.
Yep.
That's all I know. What do you got?
That is absolutely fair. I think you really hit the nail on the head with a lot of points here.
Right.
I wanna just preface because we are on the Dork Forest. I think you have lots of fans that are very passionate about lots of subjects. I have no doubt there are some H.P. Lovecraft fans in the audience right now. I guess want to do kind of my Lovecraft bona fides up top.
Okay.
I want to say completely, I am a lover. I am not an expert.
Right.
I have no doubt that I will make some factual errors during the course of this conversation.
The shouting at people's into the sky from their headphones is
and I completely invite anyone, contact me on Twitter, DM me on Twitter.
Sure.
Let's have a conversation. I always like to do
Wyatt
that.
S. Gray.
Come find me.
Go.
And
go to the Ranger page on Facebook and live it up.
Yeah. So I hope this starts a dialogue. In terms of my experience with Lovecraft, I came to him through Edgar Allan Poe, who was probably one of his top influencers.
Oh yeah.
Because he was living from 1890 to 1937, writing predominantly from probably about 1900 to 1937, where he was writing from a young age.
So Lovecraft died at 47.
He was very young. He died most likely of a stomach cancer.
Okay.
Pretty much died destitute. And
American?
American, Providence, Rhode Island. He lived in Providence, Rhode Island for his whole life. He did have a brief stint living in New York with his one-time wife, Sonia Green, I think for about maybe less than 2 years, and they unhappily divorced. She was also an author.
Okay.
And she actually collaborated. One of my favorite stories is a secret collaboration with her, and I think her influences give it a lot more humanity than most of his other stories. Because there's some kind of themes in that story. It's called the Horror at Martin's Beach.
The Horror at Martin's Beach?
Horror at Martin's Beach, which I can, I'll just summarize quickly here, just because I love that story. And I think it is kind of a great Lovecraft story. It's actually very Jaws.
Oh, really?
So imagine it's kind of like an Amity Island. It's a lovely. It sort of takes place in a windswept, fun, very ritzy, beach community,
vacation destination.
There's a little bit of exposition up top that I don't think is really the core of it, about how basically a fisherman brings up this weird kind of eel thing.
Sure.
And it's got that great trope of like a doctor examined it and then says like, well, wait a minute, this thing is it's 4 times the size of the boat. It's a baby. Which is great. Dun, dun, dun. So they drag that thing up.
Yep.
Cut to a really ritzy, you can imagine just kind of like on a beach bluff restaurant, black tie, lots of white folks dining, having a good time. It's a Saturday night. Then all of a sudden, out of the distance, you hear screaming, very much like the opening of Jaws, where it's clearly a woman drowning, screaming. So the diner's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Lifeguard is called down. They rush down to the beach. You can see, it's because it's pitch black at night, you can see there's sort of a thrushing in the surf.
Right.
They, do the toss. They try to bring it out. They finally are able to snag it. And then you got kind of 2 burly lifeguard guys. You imagine them in kind of the 1920 striped outfits. They start dragging in, but they're being kind of pulled out. They're like, oh. So then all of a sudden, all the kind of men in their tuxedos, and they grab the rope as well.
Right.
There's like 15 guys on this line, but it's just kind of dragging. All of a sudden, they realize, for some reason, psychologically, or just some sort of telekinetic force is holding them to the rope. And now that rope, like a fishing line, is reeling them in. And it's this sort of horrible, detailed of, it's drowning is the worst when it's, in shallow. You can imagine, like, you never, remember, did you see Dunkirk?
No.
Or anyway, inch by inch, these people being dragged in, and the rest of the crowd is just silent as these strong men are straining against this line, are just dragged in to the surf.
So the women and children and the wait staff are just sort of watching this happen.
They're just watching this happen.
I love the idea of the wait staff.
Yeah, no one lifts finger. And
they're like, no, my side work is done.
Oh, and that's the end of the story.
And that's the end of the story?
That's the end of the story. We never really figure out what was that entity. We are assuming, because we're maybe connecting dots of like, is that the mother fish taking revenge on the humans that took her baby?
Right.
Who can say?
We cannot.
Who can say? So that's a quick synopsis
of the Horror of Martin's Beach, and that was written in like the 20s. Or?
That would have been written most likely in I think he lived in New York in the mid 20s.
Okay,
probably like 28 or so. Again, probably got that wrong.
Right, but fair enough.
When we talk H.P. Lovecraft, huge influence, of course, was Edgar Allan Poe. That's where he came into it. That's actually where I came into it too in high school.
Right.
I was in an AP English class. We were doing a Poe kind of module.
Yeah.
My, shout out to Mr. Williams. Noticed that my teacher noticed that I was really into Poe and the macabre.
Yeah.
And just sort of offhand said, "Oh, you've ever read any Lovecraft?" I said like, "Oh, I'd heard the name, but never."
Right.
And so he actually lent me his personal anthology, which had a couple of the heavy hitter stories. Devoured that. Devoured a lot of the other stories online because they were public domain.
Right.
And just kept reading. And then I went to Necronomicon 2 years ago, which is a...
Necronomicon is the book that's in the stories.
Evil Dead. Yes.
And... but he invented the word Necronomicon.
He did.
And the Necronomicon is supposed to be a book so evil that once you read it, you go mad or something,
exactly.
Right?
So in the universe, and this is kind of really... I think maybe my thesis statement throughout this conversation is Lovecraft, the reason why he's so beloved these days is he really was ahead of his time in a lot of ways, particularly in creating a shared universe. Where we talk all about shared universes now.
Right.
But what's great
everybody
is...
wants there to be... Because the money... If they interact...
That's where it comes in. I'm sure there's going to be a Lovecraft shared universe. I've always thought it'd be fun to do like a Shakespeare in Love, but Lovecraft.
Oh, there you
go. It's the author and he's being influenced by real life things. But what's great is, so like you said with the Necronomicon, that is... something that it's an artifact that appears in a lot of his stories.
Okay.
And it's supposed to be a book that was written by a mad Arab named Abdul al-Hazred, who then found it. He's transcribed it based on hieroglyphics in a lost city. And it's stuff that if you open it, if you read it, bad stuff happens and you don't want to deal with that.
Okay, so Abdul finds the finds the book,
Yep.
translates it using his powers of hieroglyphic knowledge, which I think were just the Rosetta Stone. I think was, I don't know when it was discovered, but I think it was very popular.
Absolutely.
And so he unlocks that, and then he goes mad, and then the book goes away.
It gets lost, but then it gets kind of
like Jumanji.
Exactly.
It just keeps coming up. Okay.
And so another big part of Lovecraft, sort of the mythos that we call it, is a lot of this secret knowledge being passed down through hidden cults that exist in the fringes of
Hellboy.
society, but
Yeah.
also will sort of seep in kind of like Illuminati to the highest reaches of power.
Right, and then they won't know that they're actually under the control of a demon. And sure, this is a rich. I see
spooky,
why.
yeah.
Because it's not only it's been co-opted at every level.
Yes.
Like you could tell that. I think everyone is kind of some parts of everyone has read this.
Absolutely, and
in
that's
our current.
And that's the cool thing. If you are someone who's into, if you're into tabletop role playing, if you're into video games, if you're into horror movies, particularly if you're a fan of John Carpenter, probably John Carpenter's The Thing would be one of the more direct adaptations of, or a Lovecraftian story, I would say.
I know that Gary Gygax clearly was Tolkien and see because Poe, I read a little bit of Poe, and like you say, I have read a little bit of everything, and but the Poe stuff was super creepy, and I was like, oh, I'm good with just these two and never reading anything else. And like, I don't know how much Poe there is. How much Poe is there?
There's he also had a short life.
Yeah.
But he was pretty prolific.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, so some of my favorites are Fall of the House of Usher.
He does
would be
more
a big one.
Novellas and short stories, right?
He's also big into the short fiction, which I think...
Is Lovecraft mostly short fiction?
Pretty much everything you wrote was short fiction. There's only one novel, which was towards the end of his life, which is At the Mountains of Madness, which The Thing actually draws a lot of inspiration from, because it's also about an Antarctic expedition that goes wrong, and then there's also sort of shape-shifting monsters.
Right. I always think that they're like I remember when I was a kid, I used to watch a terrible cartoon about Tarzan, and there was always sort of, and looking back on it, there was like a Lovecraftian impulse, and you're like, well, it's because he was in the jungle. And in the jungle, you don't know what's in there. It could be anything.
That,
so
again,
it's like the ocean.
Exactly, that fear of the unknown, and again, why we see so much kind of tentacle imagery in some of Lovecraft's monsters really does come from, he had a fascination with the ocean, and that's, there's no bigger unknown second only to space. So he kind of transposed ocean iconography into space and the sort of darkness between stars.
Right. Oh, did he do space?
He did space.
He did. I did not know he did space. I thought he mostly did the ocean.
And I think, and here's kind of a cool thing here when we talk about sort of where the Lovecraft DNA has seeped in.
Yeah.
Obviously, Stephen King would probably be the most popular, huge fan. He's written several forewords to different anthology. Counts among one of his largest influences. Neil Gaiman, Alan Moore, Junji Ito, if you're familiar with that. He's a Japanese artist who does really terrifying graphic novels.
Right. Oh, I think I've avoided those for decades.
And here's the cool thing about Lovecraft that I want to give him a lot of props for, just as a human, because there's not a lot of things politically that I'll give him props for. Right. But I will give him a lot of props for, unlike other people who have found success, he did not. He actually took a real interest in the next generation of writers. Particularly, he had massive correspondences with different writers of his time, but also he accepted a lot of fan letters and would often respond personally. And here's a really cool kind of connection. One of his most prolific correspondence was with Robert Bloch. Robert Bloch sort of wrote him, I think, at age 13 or so, having just saying like, "Hey, my name is Robert Bloch. Mr. Lovecraft, I really liked your story. I do some writing too." And so rather than, the typical answer would be like, "Hey, thanks so much,
good luck,
sir.
Keep
good
doing
luck.
it."
Hey, cool." Lovecraft said like, "That's really cool. If you're interested, feel free to like send me some like notes on stories. I'd love to see what you're doing."
What?
Yeah. He sent me notes on stories, and so they start this correspondence where Robert Bloch, and this is the kicker, Robert Bloch goes on later in life in the 1950s, he writes the novel Psycho.
Oh my God!
So, which then, of course, is picked up by Hitchcock, which then, of course, informs
The
slasher
world.
movies and horror movies going
Going
at
forward.
infinity. And so it's the idea that he kind of like corresponds with this young man in, who doesn't, I don't think Robert Bloch had a great home life, so it's kind of a little bit of father figure sort of idea. And now he keeps writing, he's going on it, he's getting this sort of direct feedback, and he becomes a really prolific writer. Another Robert Bloch story that I would recommend to your listeners
Besides Psycho?
Psycho, I think if you watch the movie, you're fine.
Okay.
It's fine. And this one's a short story, is Notebook Found in a Deserted House. That was written in 1951 by Robert Bloch. And what's really cool about that story, it's about a young boy describing... basically, it's a young kind of boy who's living in the woods. He's been abandoned, and he's describing kind of these creatures that seem, and spirits that seem to want to get him, that are like kind of like Ents. But kind of like, it's really, what's great is it's written from the perspective of a 8-year-old who probably has no education. So it's very simple, but it's one story that is pointed to again and again as popularizing found fiction.
Okay.
So Blair Witch, really, you can draw a straight line from Blair Witch to Notebook and Found in an Abandoned House.
Ah, there we go.
So again, we're seeing this echoes of, and you want, and I know you're a big Tolkien fan, so you want to find the Tolkien. Of course, the Tolkien connection is, of course, Tolkien's writing, through the First World War, most books.
Right, they're writing at the same time.
They're writing at the same time, but they don't. I don't think they never directly corresponded. But you have one of probably. Lovecraft's BFF was Robert E. Howard.
Okay.
Robert E. Howard, author of the Conan series and those pulp.
I was going to mention, And
we know that with Middle-earth is kind of Tolkien took a lot of Arthurian legend, but he also took a lot of kind of Conan and that high fantasy too, especially with that different races coming together and dwarves. So there's definitely, and there's some Howard DNA and there's some Lovecraft DNA in that too.
Interesting. So did Howard write... is Howard older than
he actually did not... I believe were in the... Well, no, actually, the thing is, one thing that we point towards Lovecraft's end-of-life depression is Robert E. Howard did kill himself about 2 or 3 years before Lovecraft died. So it was a little bit of a... like a BFF
Right. So...
thing.
Yeah, because he wasn't... So they were of an age almost...
They were contemporaries. I think Howard was a bit older.
So the speculation is that Tolkien read the Conan books?
I think Tolkien would have been aware of the Conan Barbarian sort of mythology a bit, or that kind of seeped into some of the culture that he was maybe drawing on when he thinks about... Because obviously Tolkien was wide-read, and he drew from Scandinavian mythology and all sorts of stuff.
The guy was a philologist or some damn thing. It's so he's got all that... He's got all of ancient Western stuff, and then he's Norse mythology, obviously... clearly is involved.
Only because I so rarely get to talk to a real Tolkien head. I did have one thing that was pointed out to me that I never thought about that I just love so much. It's just this is a tiny nugget that won't go back to Lovecraft. Is so Saruman and Gandalf, both wizards,
right?
Both employ gunpowder. Gandalf through fireworks, which he uses to entertain and delight children.
Right.
Saruman through building a large, explosive device that blows a wall in Helm's Deep. So it's sort of this idea that they are same technology, different uses.
Right.
Which I think also, to me, it's like, it's not, I just like, oh my gosh, you're right. And they different approaches, and that's what's so great about them. Right.
Well, yeah. And it's so funny about one of the best lines in the movie, and the movie, I have addressed the movie, is I think at one point, if I remember correctly, and I've only seen the movie like 3 or 4 times, but the thing is I think at one point somebody asked the names of the other wizards, and Gandalf is like, I can't remember. Yeah. Because he's got Radagast.
And the 2 blue wizards, which
I can't remember. They're not named.
They're not really. I think if you can maybe draw.
The Silmarillion, if you go deep, but it's, and the Silmarillion I've only read once. And I've tried to listen to it on audio tape, and it's a great way to go to sleep, you guys, because it's like listening to in Genesis the when they name Begat, yeah, it's sweet.
Oh my god.
Anyway, but the Tolkien professor has a great series of podcasts actually about the Silmarillion that is fascinating.
Okay, I'm going to write that down right now.
It's essentially 8 hours, and only the Silmarillion one. Once he starts getting into the movies, I love you, man, but no. Okay, because he weeds off worse than I do. So, but the Silmarillion series is outstanding.
Okay, I will put that.
So Tolkien prof.
Returning to Lovecraft.
Yes.
So I think we hear these sort of tropes that are again and again. I think you touched on a few of them, which is coming across artifacts, things that drive you insane through the revelation. That's a big thing that comes up in a lot of stories. I would say,
I don't think clearly he didn't invent that, but he consolidated them in a way that and how many pages total do you I mean, I don't think the guy's written more than, because it was all short stories.
It was all short stories. I think all told, this is where, of course, there's some controversy too, because there's the pure Lovecraft stories. There are quite a few stories he punched up. Okay. Because as he was always kind of trying to
make extra money.
So he actually did a lot of story doctoring too.
Okay.
So there actually was quite a few instances of other pulp authors sending him a simple
Could you
kind of
put your Lovecraftian scent on this?
Yeah, so there'd be they'd send him even like a paragraph thing, and he would run with it. So there's a couple stories that aren't my favorite.
Right.
There's I have my favorites. Probably my personal favorite is a story called Rats in the Walls.
Okay.
Which and it's very much a Poe story. It's very much
sounds like a
kind
Poe
of aping Poe, and it's really broad strokes. It's about a man whose son dies in the First World War, and then he decides, since he's got no future, he's going to just basically buy he does some genealogy. Genealogy is another big thing in Lovecraft. People delving into their family trees to their peril, because they typically find out that they have a cursed lineage and they're part of some kind of cult. That's big. Yeah, that's a huge thing, which you don't see enough of anymore.
Right,
I feel
23andMe and Ancestry.com.
And I hadn't thought about that. A horror movie like that.
A horror movie, and there's something called, and I've mentioned it before, it's
Know Your Roots?
No, the Antique Roadshow spin-off called Ancestry Roadshow.
Oh, I love that idea.
There's only 4 to 6 episodes, I can't remember, and essentially it's when there is a hilarious reveal, it's usually one time. The 2 that I can remember is the older white lady who found out that her grandmother was black, and the ZZ Top looking white dude who found out that his grandfather was not black, and his black wife just looking at him going, "Are we done?" And it was pretty awesome. And so
I love that idea.
It's just sort of the you want so much from your ancestry. I did 23andMe, and I was raised to believe that I was a quarter Norwegian, a quarter Irish, and half Armenian.
Which informed you as a person and just
completely, and raised in the Armenian church, so the rest of it didn't matter anyway, except for that. And now I find out that I'm mostly white. I'm essentially half. I mean, it's very basic. I'm half white and I'm half Mediterranean, Middle Eastern.
Okay.
So sort of. And the Norwegian thing was a complete lie, because my grandmother was adopted by Norwegian people from Ireland to be their servant. Oh. So you're like, oh, okay, old school peasant stock. I get it. It's fine, and it doesn't matter. But I love the idea that he was like, don't open that cupboard.
Yeah, you open that cupboard, and then so a lot of his protagonists, which are usually kind of author XPs, they're white men who are kind of thin and more interested in reading and looking through artifacts and books and things like that.
So
and
nerds.
So you see nerds. Yeah, no, it's nerds.
So the protagonist is usually him.
Him.
Just a sort of weedy nerd.
It's same how Stephen
by the
King,
way,
it's always writers. And,
those guys age so good. Stephen King as a boy, if you met him, you'd be like, what a nerd. And now you're like, that guy's kind of hot. For an old guy, and
he's making that scratch.
Yeah, well, not it's not
even that.
It's not the money. It's the fact that all that reading and all that navel gazing really makes decent men.
Thank you.
And so,
are you
looking forward to it?
Well, no, I oftentimes remark, like, I do have a girlfriend, love her very much.
Sure.
I would like to be fitter. for
Sure.
her. But here's the thing: there's a diminishing returns. If you have your abs are like rock hard, that's a lot of hours in the gym. That's a lot of hours you're not reading, listening to podcasts, absorbing things that might make you more interesting at cocktail parties.
Right.
Yeah.
More fun to. It's as I've said it before. Andy Ashcraft is better looking than I need, and he's great. Anyway, so
I wanted
protagonist.
We covered that. I want to say a big thing about Lovecraft is, and because we're leading up to the Cthulhu conversation, because he happens to be, so for whatever reason, that's a monster that has kind of been risen in popular culture.
Yeah.
What's brilliant about the Call of Cthulhu, which is the story that codified that monster, is
that's the actual name.
That's the name of the short story. It's the Call of Cthulhu. And really broad strokes, it's about a guy whose uncle dies.
Okay.
He goes through, and his uncle...
He goes through his stuff.
Despite his uncle's in his will saying, as soon as you get my stuff, burn it.
Don't go through my stuff.
Don't burn all my papers. Burn everything in this trunk, which is full of papers and letters.
Yep.
Do not go through it. It is then... He doesn't. So now it's the nephew going through the letters one by one. And what's great about the story is it's not a straight narrative or a linear narrative. It is one letter or pieces of letter or after another. And then as you do it, I really think I've heard described as writing in the negative space, where sort of like painting in the negative space, where you do a brushstroke here, a brushstroke here, a brushstroke here. You're not directly painting Cthulhu, but then as all these different disparate pieces come together from different parts of the world, this image of what lies at the center,
so
which
you
is
paint around it to create like a triangle, let's say.
Triangle.
And the triangle pops out at you.
Exactly. And then, so with the reader, you're filling in the blanks in that unknown, and it gets scarier and scarier the deeper it goes, and you realize, oh man, this is a big deal. Because right now I'll throw the mystery. I'll explain what Cthulhu is. It's not going to be as effective, but Cthulhu, if we're going to really just break it down, is a entity,
right?
Probably about the size and temperament of Godzilla.
Okay. That
is in a kind of Atlantis sort of city, deep in the ocean. It didn't always be in the ocean; actually sank into the ocean, and he's there, kind of lying dormant until such a time as that city rises back up. And he is telepathically reaching out to people to try to hasten that rise, so that because he's super big. And again, going back to that idea of like, oh, this is just a baby. He is merely the priest and the gatekeeper of what lies beyond, which is even more massive and horrifying than he is. And he is pretty, oh my God, he's bad. And he's sort of like a Godzilla who has, a massive sort of squiddy face, flat and, horrible claws.
I've seen
that
them.
Guy.
So, Call of Cthulhu is essentially the letters call him.
It's sort of this uncle.
Spoiler alert from 1925.
Yeah, this uncle sort of piecing together all these things, because it's sort of, one is a account of a detective in Louisiana who breaks up a cult that's worshiping in the bayous. And there's sort of a Cthulhu cult that's worshiping him and his experiences with that. And then another one is a series of interviews where he is interviewing painters and poets and artists, because for some reason people who are more creatively sensitive are more tuned in to these sort of telepathic waves that Cthulhu is sending out to kind of do that and describe in these horrifying dreams.
I would like to blame H.P. Lovecraft for every mystery TV show that has a voodoo priest.
Yep. Big into voodoo and voodoo. Yep.
Castle. Everybody just dashes off to New Orleans, and then all of a sudden there's a CSI, and there is a lady with dreadlocks who knows about voodoo and tries to explain that it's actually a religion that doesn't have anything to do with sticking pins in people, but then pins are being stuck into people. So let's blame him for that.
He played with that, yeah.
So wait, to go back to something else that you said that I was gonna. So he responded to Robert Bloch.
Yes,
and he responded to other writers, less successful, but just nicely. Yeah, was just there for the next generation. But horribly political.
Yes,
his politics and his attitude toward people. Which I think we could have called that. Talk about the call of Lovecraft. Is we could have looked at some of his work and said, that guy's not a people person.
He's not, and that's the thing, is he spent most of his life in his home, which was, he was raised by his aunts, who were not too kind to him. And if you kind of just picture, like, he had a nice inheritance, which he was able to kind of
Trust
just
fund
live
baby,
off
kinda?
of. Because
Okay.
he had his father, who I believe died of syphilis. His mother, I believe, was taken to
I'm sorry to laugh at the
institution.
syphilis. I'm an asshole.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So he was raised by, I think, a grandmother and a pretty disciplinarian aunt.
Okay.
Who kind of, I think, put a lot of hypochondria into him. So he was an indoor person. But he obviously was not antisocial because he
Right,
was...
because he wanted it.
What he wrote, he kind of like ranks up there with like a Thomas Aquinas of just like how much letters and correspondence he produced throughout his life. He was writing
really?
constantly to the point where kind of towards the end of his life, he was kind of so penny pinching.
Yeah.
He sometimes would forego a meal that day because he was also like a big budgeter
Yeah.
to pay for postage. He would say, "I'm going to skip dinner because I can
I
do
just
that.
wanna-
I can
I wanna
do a
write this
couple. I can
letter."
get a couple more posteds."
So
out
he was
there.
he was an indoor guy.
He was an indoor
So-
guy,
but he
mostly stayed in
wrote,
Providence. Wrote, like,
but had like
morning to sunset.
correspondence with a variety of humanity.
Absolutely.
So I was going to say,
Mostly young white guys, I would say, but
really?
yeah,
Okay.
he liked white people a lot.
Well, that's weird. We can talk about
Yeah.
that in a second because I was going to say another guy who has really shitty politics
Mm-hmm.
but gives back to the next generation is Orson Scott Card.
Yes.
And Orson,
the anti-gay stuff.
yeah, he's got enormous. But then when you read his books, you're like, but you like people, like, and you want people to be good to each other.
There's
but
an
for some
optimistic
reason-
humanity in that too.
Yeah, there's a lot of I mean, his stuff has a lot more sort of like, and it has some of the best parts of what I think of as the best part, and nobody asked. That's the important thing. The best parts of Mormonism in it, which is where it's sort of a community based and take care of each other and also admit your faults and be sort of available for recompense to make amends and to fix shit that you've done wrong. But on the other side, he's so afraid of his own dick for some reason that he has some sort of problem with homosexuality. So, but he has created these young science fiction groups for the next generation. And has funded,
Which is wonderful.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
And like he's created guys like, and he hasn't created them. They're entities under them. I mean, they do their own work, but like, is it Brian Sanderson? Whatever. He wrote Elantris. He wrote the Mistborn series.
Okay.
And he's a wonderful author. And so I'll give him props for that and never watch an interview with him. So
that's because I mean, speaking as someone who's a stand-up, there's no adrenaline shot that beats if you happen to be on a show with someone you respect and is a comedian who's a professional who's farther along.
Right.
Them just giving you like, hey, good set. Now that is you can burn that in your engine for a while.
yeah.
So the idea,
or the opposite when they don't know who the fuck you are and you're ignored. Who's the guy who wrote Fight Club?
Oh, Czech Palahniuk.
Right. So I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan either. I literally saw the movie.
Yeah.
And I didn't get until like the I'm like I never get it. I never get anything until the second drop. Like you have to drop both shoes and then go, "Hey Jackie, that guy was a ghost the whole time." Oh, was he? Anyway, so so I met that guy and the Fight Club guy, and I was like, "Oh, I bet you he'd be fascinating to talk to because he has that Fight Club attitude." He's that. And I thought this will be great. We're sitting in the green room together. We're doing a show together, and so I'm like, "Hi, it's nice to meet you." It's something about his work, and he goes, he looks past me and he goes, "Is there wine?" And I'm like, "Oh, well,
Darn.
I understand there is some wine in the fridge. Go for it, man." But other situations where you're just like Dennis Miller, who lost his tiny lizard mind as well recently.
Yeah,
But-
it feels like last decade or so.
yeah. So as I opened for him accidentally, he didn't have an opener. So he's walking by me and he's like, "You're really funny. Has Jay seen you?" And I said, "Jay who?" And he goes, "Leno?" And I was like, "Oh, no, he doesn't know who I am." Anyway, so, and I don't know why I had to tell those two stories, but I did. And now, H.P. Lovecraft, did you, so when you get to meet somebody who you were telling a story, because it's your hour.
No, I was going to say, no, I think this is a good segue into a conversation that I was hoping to have with you because I think it is very timely which is, you brought up Orson Scott Card. I think when you read Lovecraft in a modern context, he was someone who was, even for his time, we're talking about the turn of the 20th century, definitely in the United States, not very inviting to immigrants as opposed to now.
Wait, so even for his time,
he was pretty
he
bad.
was a horrible racist.
When we're drawing this not from his actions, he was not, a member of the Ku Klux Klan. He was not.
Oh, he was not.
No.
Okay.
But through his writings, and through one poem in particular. Oh,
essentially,
boy,
his
bad.
depictions of
there's not,
humanity.
Well, there's not too many depictions of people who aren't white in his stories, and those who are typically are kind of raving cult savages worshiping at an altar of depravity.
Okay,
so there's a couple of those. Some of those depictions in Call of Cthulhu of sort of these swamp people who are descendants of, I think they're Lashif or a pirate captain kind of thing in the South that people can draw lineage from. That was pretty problematic. One short story in particular, which is called "The Street," runs. It feels like when when some of the conservative commentators write kids' books, and they're like, because the whole thing is like the story is about like there once was this street and it was a great street and everyone got along, and then these people came in and they started ruining the street. It's like, okay, so there's not even one. It's just one metaphor.
You're not
about,
even. Yeah.
It's like America was great. We were all Anglo-Saxon. We got along, and then this happened, and this happened. These people came in.
Right.
Those people, and it's like, oh man, HP.
Right. So you just want to go, hey, crazy old guy, and then they always say. Someone just said this to me yesterday. They said, that's just cranky old white dudes. They're going to die. Don't worry. And I was like, I think my parents said that.
I saw that.
About their generation. They're like, don't worry about it. They'll die. And I'm like, they keep making new idiots.
They keep coming.
I don't know what is going on. But
so the question being is, this is not, H.P. Lovecraft is definitely not the most problematic author, or he's not the most problematic person you can like the art of. Difference being is, when we talk about people today that are problematic for lots of different reasons.
There's a litany from Polanski to Woody Allen to Bill Cosby to...
I will say, Asterisk, Lovecraft is long dead.
Yes.
He has no heirs. There's no Lovecraft... there's no Lovecraft...
It died out with him, man.
There's no Lovecraft estate. All of his stories are in the public domain.
Oh, interesting.
So there is no... So we're taking out the whole, I'm not, vote with your dollar kind of argument. That's gone.
Public domain.
So now the argument is like, can you enjoy these stories knowing that the person who penned them was pretty bad in terms of his thoughts about where white people and other rankings of people and eugenics and that stuff. You can do the same thing
with the Bible. Mm-hmm. You can do the same thing with the AA book. The guys who founded Alcoholics Anonymous were not great.
Oh yeah. Oh, they're real puritanical and
but womanizers.
Oh, I see.
Like literally the guy Bill who founded it and his wife Lois. He cheated on her forever, and didn't let her write the chapter in the book called "To the Wives." And
why would you trust her with such a?
Why would you trust her?
Not
with
her
something?
Wheelhouse.
It's turns out she lived through it, but nope, he's going to write it, and so she created Al-Anon, and she was like, but. I mean, what they say about all of those books, or what sane people say about books like the Bible or the Alcoholics Anonymous literature or whatever, is take what you like, leave the rest. And like I've been thinking recently about Woody Allen movies and how much I love them, but I haven't been able to watch one since Hannah and Her Sisters, which was
because he's pretty much yearly at this point.
Right, he's cranking them out.
Yeah.
And Hannah and Her Sisters was probably 20 years ago. And I think he's been married to his stepdaughter for about 20 years. I mean, it's not like they haven't been together for a long time. It's just, he creeps me out because he raised her.
Yes.
It's not like a romance novel where he went away for 15 years and she was 9 and then she was 25. He was there when she was 15 and he was helping her with her homework and she was his daughter. And he was there in 16. He was there in 17 when she was still his daughter and he was talking to her about colleges. And then 18, he was like, is she my daughter? And 19, she's not my daughter. We're getting married. And I'm fucking that. And you're like, you're a creep.
Yeah.
So that's where it gets weird for me. It doesn't feel like a romance. It doesn't feel romantic at all.
Absolutely.
But I was thinking about if you could take his scripts and recast them. I mean, literally remake them. First of all, it would drive him nuts.
Yeah.
He would hate that. And second of all, I might like those movies again.
So Woody Allen might have 10 more years left.
Oh, to live?
Live?
But I would want to do it while he was alive to drive him nuts.
Okay.
I would want Josh Gondelman to play Woody Allen. Anybody, really. I don't care. I like Josh Gondelman.
Because I imagine the Woody Allen conversation is going to happen definitely 60 years from now. There will be film geeks who will bandy this back about.
Right,
sure,
and they will talk about the
and they'll rank his
viability.
movies and this and that. Yeah,
right, and they'll say, "Can you enjoy a Woody Allen movie?" And Andy Kindler will say, "Yes, you can," and you're like, "Fair enough, okay, it's fine." But
because here's one quote that I really want to pull out there. It's from Alan Moore. He wrote a foreword to the annotated Lovecraft, which came out in 202014.
And Alan Moore is V for Vendetta.
V for Vendetta.
Watchmen. People should know that he is nuts, but he's nuts. But he's also great.
He can craft worlds like nobody's business, and we owe him a lot for people who are into that. He wrote, and I'll sort of breeze through this. It's not quite a paragraph, but I think it really sums up a lot of stuff we were talking about and sort of my feelings on this. So this is on his kind of racism.
Okay.
In this light, it is possible to perceive Howard Lovecraft as an almost unbearably sensitive barometer of American dread. Far from outlandish eccentricities, the fears that generated Lovecraft's stories and opinions were precisely those of the white, middle-class, heterosexual, Protestant-descended males who were the most threatened by the shifting power relationships and values of the modern world. Feels like we could...
It speaks to us as we sit here.
And though he may have regarded himself in accordance with the view held of him by the readership and even those that knew him personally as the embodiment of his most emblematic fable, The Outsider, which we can touch on in a second.
Oh, right.
The Outsider
I'm sure he thought of himself as an outsider because he lived his life. He was in his fishbowl.
Absolutely. The Outsider, really quickly, is a really simple story. A guy wakes up seemingly from a nap, feels like, what am I doing? Wanders down the hill, goes, sees a party going on, walks into the party, everyone freaks out, runs. He turns to a window and then gasps and is like, there's a monster there, only to realize, no, he's a zombie.
Oh, okay.
And everyone is reacting to him. It's something we've seen before, but that's kind of where we're coming. That's the context.
Oh, fair enough.
In his frights and panics, he reveals himself as an almost unheard of fluke statistical phenomenon. The absolutely average man, an entrenched social insider, unnerved by new and alien influences from without. This, it might be suggested, is the underlying reason for our ongoing absorption in his work, a fascination that seems only to increase as Lovecraft and his times recede into the past. In H.P. Lovecraft's tale, we are afforded an oblique and yet unsettling perceptive view into the haunted origins of the fraught modern world and its attendant mindset that we presently inhabit. Coded in an alphabet of monsters, Lovecraft's writings offer a potential key to the understanding our current dilemma, although crucial to this that they are understood in the full context of the place and times from which they are blossomed.
First of all, I enjoy that we know exactly where the quote was coming because you had the quote voice. Well played. Second of all, it got a little long-winded, but that's Alan Moore for you.
That's Alan Moore.
And this is, I would say this, is that has been the defense of straight white people forever.
Yeah.
Which is, you know where they're coming from. They're people too. And you're like, yes. But the awareness of other people's experience from a place of privilege is the only, it's only now, and I'm 50. So it's only now that I can actually try to, it's not empathy. It's literally a revelation of like an onion level of like something was peeled away and I was like, oh shit, kind of revelation of my own racism and my own expectations, because I have been the happiest of all liberals, knowing, and I genuinely don't think I have a lot of white guilt. What I feel like is I have white responsibility to getting out of the way. And to do that, I heard somebody speak, and I think it was the guy who's writing Black Panther. He is more famous for other things. His last name is Coates, Coates.
Ta-Nehisi
Yes.
Coates. Yeah.
And
I think a regular contributor to The Atlantic, I believe.
Yes,
or other publications.
He's got a PhD. The guy has
He's
books.
smart.
He's the guy's, but he also wrote the Black Panther comic books I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so
Great range.
real nice range.
Yeah.
Real nice range. But he was talking about how the greatest problem is and we can have this conversation because we're both sitting here from a place of white privilege, and but he was saying that the hardest part was to choose to give up some of that privilege to share it. It's something you learn when you're a tiny child to share. And then you're raised in a capitalist society that tells you that, no, you got to get yours. And then, but you have that ingrained in you, that socialism of being four in preschool, if such a thing could be said. But to consciously shut up when I'm in a room with women of color, trying to have a conversation is because I always have an opinion because I'm a comic. Whenever they ask a comic, like they keep asking like Seinfeld and Chris Rock about college gigs, and you're like, they don't, it's not a perspective. It's not now, you ask them 25 years ago about college gigs.
Because they're also, I mean, is it a racial perspective or is it them being kind of older dudes who are doing their thing?
They're gajillionaires, and they don't have to do those gigs anymore, and so they don't have the right perspective to even answer the damn question. But if you ask me about them, I don't do colleges. I would have an opinion.
Absolutely.
Guess what? I'm going to have an opinion about everything because I'm a comic. I'm going to try to riff on it. I'm going to try to answer it. And there's no. So I mean, this Alan Moore. I like Alan Moore. I think. I've always liked Alan Moore. I always think he's the guy that Harlan Ellison has always tried to be. And because he's kind of the real deal.
Oh, yeah. He lives it.
He lives it. And I'm sure he's irritating as all hell with his, I don't want to be on the credits. And you're like, really? Do your children not want residuals? They do. They do want residuals. But, okay. And, but I don't think... I think he's got a unique perspective because he's British and he's looking at the American experiment from there, and he can also see that he's an old dead white guy, H.P. Lovecraft. Who was
very old, very dead,
and a bit of a shut in.
Oh yeah,
and so yeah, I think that he's right, but he's also it's something that we have to address as a not good enough excuse.
I agree, and I think one thing I took away from this is. Perhaps there is value because a big theme of Lovecraft's story is this sort of existential dread that you are an island of humanity, and I mean,
I think you're right. I think
darkness, and for whatever kind of you want to do this, there are unknowable, seemingly strange darkness that exists all around you that it's closing in.
Beautifully drawn,
and he does that, and so that's kind of the feeling I think that someone who is deeply xenophobic. Would come from. And you could write those stories. You could be like a shitty guy who just takes it to the real world and says like, well, we need to fight back against that. Or you could therapeutically weave that into your writing and you write about these horrific monsters and cults that are seemingly all around you and nowhere at once that are coming to get you.
Have you read the Mike Mignola?
No, I've not read that one. Sorry, I popped the...
Yeah, I'm going to probably have it. So... Mike Mignola writes BPRD and Hellboy, and a lot. He writes it's Lord Baltimore.
Okay.
He's got a lot of they're comics and they're graphic novels, and they're all from a clearly Cthulhu, Lovecraftian influenced world. But he creates these worlds where the monsters are on both sides, and the monsters. Hellboy is a demon sent to anticipate the apocalypse. But because he's a baby, and the scientist kind of is like, he's just a baby. Let's raise him. And so he becomes, and it's nature versus nurture.
Or he's a creature in both worlds.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And so, but it's a way that you can extrapolate from Lovecraft and create nature versus nurture kind of thing where you're like, nah, you just raise him right. It'll be fine. I know he's drawn to stick his giant fist of a thing into the key and open up the minions of hell. And Sandman also does that.
Yep.
Gaiman does that, where he takes the xenophobia and he takes the fear of death and the fear of the other. The fear of death in the Sandman is so fascinating because she's like, yeah, no, I'm death. It's fine. Don't sweat it. And she's kind of a punk rock gothy kind of chick. And, just kind of relatively just mellow and cool and also, just exhausted. Right? I mean, she's
always working.
Right. She's working and she's like, no, I've heard it. I know you don't want to go. Anyway, we gotta go.
So,
anyway,
I love that.
I don't know if you've read Sandman.
I've read excerpts. I've been meaning to bite. I mean, it's a big bite.
Well, it's 75, and Lucifer is the spinoff written by Brian K. Vaughan, I think.
Okay.
And his story is Lucifer, and I've described it before, but the basic thing is that Lucifer feels like he was set up by God because God has all these plans, and Lucifer's like, well, what if I don't want to do that? And he's like, well, you're banished. And then he's like, all right, well, I'm going to be that guy then. And then he makes hell. And he doesn't make hell. People make hell. And people make their own hell. And he's like, yeah, you can come in here and beat yourself to death. Go ahead. Forever.
I like that. So he is the embodiment of ultimate freedom and hands-off parenting.
Right.
He's just saying, no, do your thing.
Do your thing.
Yeah.
And in Sandman, he gives the keys to hell to the Sandman to dream, and then he weeds off. He's gone, and he pops up a couple more times. But Lucifer is the spinoff that I believe Brian K. Vaughan did, and there's a great scene. It was a terrible Netflix show, but there's a great scene where he's sitting on the beach, the day after, having like a glass of wine or a martini or something in Los Angeles. He's opened up a jazz club, and he's looking at the sunset, and he goes, all right, you had some good ideas. But the Lucifer arc is all about how he's trying to get away from God's ineffable plan. And God keeps showing up going, no, I called that. I knew that you were going to leave hell. And Lucifer's like, I fucking hate you.
Oh, it's the classic Greek tragedy. The more you try to evade prophecy, the more you fall right
except
into
for
it. Yeah.
in a modern sensibility of he's just like, you're such a big brother about this. Like, why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself? Quit hitting yourself. And Lucifer's like, I have got to get out of this universe. And so
gotta get on that.
Yeah, they're both great and they're both collected. And I bought Andy the bound leather Sandmans with extra art and stuff.
Oh, the omnibus.
Omnibuses. Yeah. I wouldn't recommend them.
Really?
Because they're really hard to read because they're unwieldily large.
I see. So you kind of have to...
I would go with the regular trade size if you want to read it. Because...
Do you recommend binging it, or would you recommend doing it piecemeal as it... Because there's deeper, really meaty ideas on it. So maybe you finish one and just say like, oh, I'm going to think about the concept of eternity and da-da-da and this.
Right.
And, yeah.
I would recommend... I know that I binged on it, and I could reread it. It's sort of what I was talking about on the last episode, or the next episode, I guess, in this case, about I've told people to read The Lord of the Rings, and they're like, I can't read it. The poems kill me.
A lot
and
of
I'm
songs.
like, don't read the poems.
Yeah.
Just skim, and then come back to them the next time you read them. So I'm like when Andy reads, some people read things, they stay read. Right? They read them thoroughly from start to finish. And I don't know if that's how you read.
I got some retention. Right. I mean, I revisited The Lord of the Rings a few times, but I think it's mostly in there.
But it's density. Like they read slow, they read carefully, they comprehend.
For me, I like to read character dialogue aloud.
Oh, do
which
you?
I think helps a lot.
Oh, that's kind of fascinating.
Because it's cool, because then I can think about the characters. Yeah.
Yeah.
I take my time with it.
What I tend to do is I tend to read the whole book super fast and then reread.
Okay.
So that I find other parts of the plot in the second or third reading. And even crap novels. If I like a like a Jack Reacher or whatever nonsense Louis L'Amour. It doesn't matter. I'll reread them because I will have gotten, good guy wins, excellent, well played. And then there's dialogue in it. There's good writing in the middle of it, and great philosophies and things to be discovered. How would you recommend I read Cthulhu? Because I don't read a lot of short stories.
Well, I would say Cthulhu is something that is pretty accessible. So you could actually jump right into it. You can go online
because they're
right
separate.
now. Yeah, no, Cthulhu is, I would say, maybe less than, it's like a 40-pager.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, it flows. And actually what's nice is, since it is broken up into these different kind of letters or accounts, you could read those like chapters if you want. So I'd say it's probably, I think it's like 5 chapters, give or take. One sets up the uncle, one is about the Bayou detective, one
Are you talking Call of Cthulhu? Or
Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu
is what to start with?
Here's the thing. If I was going to say to your listeners, one thing that I really think that's very simple, and I noticed that you have a background in Christian mythology in the Bible, would be the color out of space. Color out of space is in many ways kind of a Lovecraft's take on the Book of Job.
Oh.
It's a very simple story. It's about a farmer living out in the middle of nowhere. Meteorite crashes into his field. He calls some, it's kind of a weird looking rock, so he calls the people from the local college. The scientist dudes come out. They pick at it, they poke on it. It has these strange properties and seems to just kind of evaporate, even though it's rock-like.
Oh, wow.
And then now cut to the farmer feeling great because all of a sudden, the next season, his crops are enormous.
Right.
But there's something strange about them, and they're rotted from the inside, and then they start glowing, and then there seems to be something that has seeped into the groundwater. So it's this idea that there's this alien creature, this entity, strikes the earth, strikes this farm, seeps into the soil, and is now in the water. And all of a sudden, his kids start acting strangely. So it's a story of infection.
Okay.
And if you've ever read Stephen King's The Tommyknockers, Stephen King is essentially taking that idea of, in that story, the main character is walking their dog. They trip over what looks like a rock. They're like, that's not a rock. They dig it up. And then over the course of, I think, a week, they dig up an alien spaceship in their backyard.
Wow. And
so this idea of something lands in your backyard, you don't understand it, but it's not so much that because it's not sentient, but it's menacing, as if its life cycle involves just sapping energy from what's around it.
Okay.
That one's easy to understand. I've just summarized it, but you don't read it for the plot, you read it for the lovely descriptions, you read it for this ratcheted up sense of dread of this farmer, and a farmer who he's not it's from his point of view, he's not a smart man, he's a man of the earth.
Right.
And so you get kind of sad because he's grown up in this valley. He's not going to move. He's not going to pack up his family and leave. So he's just kind of enduring as things get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
So that one I think is a great one to start. Well, I would say if you're going to do a 3-part kind of thing, I would say to the readers,
the color of space.
The color out of space. Great one to kind of open up with. I would say The Shadow over Innsmouth. If you want to get some real cursed lineage stuff, that one is actually a pretty straightforward narrative tale about a young man who's touring New England.
Okay.
He decides to take a bus tour into this weird town that people are like, well, stay out of that town. He's like, it's like, he has to be warned. He says, fuck that. He goes into the town. The bus breaks down. It's very clear that this town is full of people. It's a town with a dark secret.
Right.
I won't spoil what the secret is.
Don't do it.
And he just... he wants to leave that night, but he can't because the bus mysteriously breaks down. So he has to spend the night at the inn. And
shadow out of what?
The shadow over Innsmouth. Inn's mouth, meaning like the mouth at the inn.
Oh, right. Oh, I get it.
Seaside town with a dark secret.
Got it.
And then I think Call of Cthulhu is a good one to kind of round that out.
Yeah.
And if you really love, and this is where I'll go into just a quick plug before we,
because we're
going into
an hour. Yeah.
If you're a lover of weird short fiction, definitely check out Lovecraft. If you want to reach out to me, I always like to talk that stuff.
Yeah.
I did, and it's a good timing because the 3rd volume of a horror anthology series that I voiced. I didn't write it, but I provided the voice for. It's out of Darkwater Syndicate. It's called Shadows and Teeth. So it's
nice.
10 terrifying tales of horror and suspense. So if you like,
and what's that on?
That is on Audible.
Oh, on Audible.
Yeah,
there you go.
if you like the sound of my voice, if you like maybe me reading and getting into some of those fun things, check that out. If you tweet at me.
It's Wyatt S. Gray.
Tweet me. I've got promo codes, so if you've made it through this far the show, you're probably a fan of Weird Fiction, so I'll be happy to send you a free copy. You can listen to it.
Oh, Dork Forest fans, the Rangers, they're definitely
hello Rangers.
Hello.
And it's fun, and so if you like to see, these are usually young authors writing. These are contemporary short stories.
Right.
Some of there's one about a World War I werewolf. There's one about there's a great one about like a succubus. Like if you like short digestible stories that'll spook you and send us tingle up your spine, check it out. Shadows and Teeth on Audible. And it's at Wyatt S. Gray. Yep, on Twitter and Wyatt Gray Comedy, GRAY .com, WyattGrayComedy.com. And then and you're doing the Nerd Melt shows now. Are they monthly? Yeah, we're hopefully going to secure. I think they're just about ready to commit to us. They had a couple trial things, so I think we're going to hopefully secure that second Saturday of the month. Okay. If you like good comedy, if you're in the LA area, and if you want to pick up a couple comic books before you go to a show or afterwards,
because Meltdown is. And I would recommend Mike Mignola, and his Hellboy stuff is pretty amazing. And but right now I'm liking his Lord Baltimore. BPRD got bogged down in the frogs. Anyway, so
do I want to do what I'm reading right now, or a plug? Okay, I'm working my way through a nonfiction book right now. I find very interesting and topical. It's called The Dead Hand. The author escapes me right now, but it's all about the history of the nuclear program during the Cold War. So it pretty much is a lot of stuff that became declassified within the last 5 years or so. Oh, interesting. So conversations and transcripts going all the way back from Eisenhower to Reagan. And the Dead Hand. If you thought the Cuban Missile Crisis was scary, you don't know all the close calls we had that you probably don't know about because they were...
I just watched War Games again, and
it's right on there.
DEFCON 1.
And I wonder, why is it that you and I just seem to be... why is nukes in the public consciousness right now? Why would we reach? Why would we be drawn to that as comedians and people who kind of try to be in the zeitgeist?
Yes, history is cyclical, you guys. Here's the good news: it's cyclical. Here's the bad news: it's cyclical.
Here's the bad news: during the Cold War, there was a phone line between the Kremlin and the White House, so we could pick it up at any time. The bad news is there's not a phone line between Washington and Pyongyang right now.
Oh,
so
but.
Miscommunications happen.
I will say Donald probably has Vladimir's phone number, cell-wise. In other news...
also, stay safe out there on this Halloween night, everybody. If you're going out, do not drink and drive. Take care of yourself. Take care of your friends.
Hey, take an Uber or a Lyft, you guys.
They probably have a promo code right now.
It's true. My last DUI cost $7,000, you guys. So know in your hearts that you will also save money as well as possibly lives. So thank you, Wyatt Gray, for being on the
Thank you, Jackie.
Forest.
Thank you, Rangers, for listening.
All right. And Rangers, you know the rules out there. Take care of each other.
My hat, my hat, my hat. They're dancing around my hat, my hat, my hat, my hat. Well, what do you think of that? If it looks like a Mexican hat dance and it sounds like a Mexican hat dance, it's most likely a Mexican hat dance. So take off your hat and let's dance.
Yay! Oh my God. Why don't we just call that as the end of the show?